Thank you very much. So thanks everybody for coming back from the break here at DevSecCon. The thing that I want to talk about right now is how we can stop the security groundhog. But because a lot of people are not all from the United States, so to introduce myself at first, I'm Erik Costlow. I do Director of Developer Relations for a company called Contrast Security that focuses on application security. We offer a suite of self-service tools, and just last week I launched a DevSecOps site. I'm also one of the tech editors at an industry news site called InfoQ that is a lot of news for software developers and architects. So what we do is we cover information that's happening in the community. All of the content that's written there, it's not written by professional editors, it's written by practitioners in the software industry who know how to write well. And we also feature a lot of software presentations at events like QCon. Everything is written by industry practitioners. It's generally CEOs, CTOs of technology companies who write things. And actually earlier today, we just published the eMag number 100 that I organized, and it's about DevSecOps of shifting left in practice. So it has a lot of practical guidance in it in terms of how to manage cloud infrastructures and especially shift security left to integrate security into your life cycle. But the thing that I want to talk about today is something that I call the security groundhog. But because everyone's not in the United States, what I want to do first is to introduce the concept of the security groundhog, which in the United States, we have a holiday that occurs on February 2nd that's just a way to celebrate the end of winter. And what we do on February 2nd is we wonder, is there going to be more weeks of winter? Is it going to stay cold? Or is it going to start warming up? So rather than looking at weather forecasts and models, what we decide to do here is to go ask a rodent that's going to pop its head out of the ground. And the rodent pops its head up out of the ground and it does this little look around, and it's going to do one of two things. Either it's going to see its shadow and scurry back into its hole, in which case it means we have 6 more weeks of winter, or it's going to come out of the hole and walk around and bask in the sun, which means that it's time for spring. Now, what the security groundhog is someone who's relatively similar. It's some guy in the organization who's not a part of your team or not a part of your development organization, who just shows up seemingly out of nowhere and looks around, and there's an important date, like the time that you're supposed to release your product or ship, and this guy just starts looking around your project. And if this person sees something that they deem risky, they're going to go back and say that you have 6 more weeks of development. So the reason that I tend to joke about animals instead of giving a raw technical presentation is that the last couple presentations that I did with InfoQ and what people wanted for the eMag was not raw, straight technical information of how do I do something or what's the best practice. What people were looking for was the role of how do we work together? How do we get different people in an organization? Maybe I'm a startup, maybe I'm an enterprise, but how do we get everybody working together? So I took this screenshot from the eMag that we just published that's from Team Topologies for anyone who uses that framework. And in there, there's an article, an interview about how security groups work within the Team Topologies framework. And we cover the fact that security is often an enabling team that provides tools to other groups. So I want to talk about some of the tools that you can use to help prevent that security groundhog from seeing their shadow. And the reason is that all developers are typically doing a lot at all times. And everyone says, well, how are we going to be on schedule? We have to release this. I'm always a little bit behind. And we tell our managers that we're behind, and our managers go up to their bosses and they say, well, we're a little bit behind. And that cascades up the organization where ultimately people just say, everything is fine. The company's doing great. We're going to make a lot of money this quarter. But meanwhile, we're struggling to hit our deadlines. And now what's happening in a lot of organizations is that developers are responsible for their security. But the ultimate way that people tend to do this is you focus your security on the things that you can control. How can you take that security and put it into your normal development work? And when you look at what people in the industry say, the common term that you always see is this role of shift left. If you search for that, you'll get a whole lot of results where everyone just says the trend right now is shifting left. So it's pretty clear on what to do. And there's a couple different tools that people can use to prevent that security groundhog from seeing their shadow. One is to track software dependencies. Another is scan your code through static analysis to find custom vulnerabilities. And then you can instrument the code to find different vulnerabilities with a very high level of accuracy. And what you would do with dependency tracking, this is something I heard other people talking about software bill of materials. This is something that you use to enumerate the libraries in your application, pick out what libraries your application is using, and then just look at a standard CVE database to see what different vulnerabilities have I imported as a result of bringing in these libraries. The nice part is now you have a continuous view as to what makes up your software. It's fully automated, so there's very little that you can do and very little that you can get wrong. So there's a really high bang for the buck here in terms of the effort that you can do. Now, another capability that a lot of members in different organizations can do, you can do the dependency analysis to pick out where your libraries are vulnerable, but static analysis is something that pertains specifically to your code. Let's say you use a series of libraries, each of which is perfectly secure, but you connect those libraries in a way that's insecure. Maybe you take that user input, you pass it directly to a SQL query, you're using a secure version of your database connector, but you've now introduced a SQL injection. So what static analysis can do, typically in your build pipeline on a pull request, on a nightly build, or some periodic event, it looks through the code, it finds ways that your custom code connects with all of the dependent libraries, and it picks out various coding flaws. And there's a couple types that you can configure these tools to do. One is deep data flow analysis that analyze the way that different components connect together so that you can pick out high severity, high impact vulnerabilities like injection flaws. Another is just a simple spot check or a semantic analysis that you can do on each pull request that just look and keep obviously bad code out. The time that I would do this is typically on each pull request. Make sure you get that automated analysis on every request that comes in, pick out any security flaws, and just prevent new security flaws from being introduced into the application. The last capability that you can introduce to help the security groundhog spot their shadow is something called instrumentation analysis. And this is something that takes only a couple minutes to hook into a running application. And what it does is it places security sensors inside of an application to pick out vulnerabilities as the application is used. So it's very similar to things like application performance monitoring, where you analyze the production performance of an application and you pick out what's slow simply by watching and tracking amounts of time. What an integrated analyzer can do for security is just to watch exactly the same way, but instead of tracking for time, it starts tracking for security events and just looking for security sensitive information, like what cryptographic algorithms do I use? When I go to execute queries, what queries are those, and do they actually use any user input? If I'm going to go and run system commands or system processes, how can I create a constant inventory of what those processes are and ensure that I haven't passed any user input into them in order to create a runtime code injection vulnerability? And the benefit of why you'd put each of these three capabilities into your SDLC, either at the pipeline or as the application is used, is that you can help that person from your organization, from a central security team, or somebody who wants to come in and do a vulnerability analysis like a penetration tester. You can have found the way that that security groundhog would have seen their shadow in the first place. So rather than them coming into your project last minute, popping their head up, looking around and saying, oh my God, I see a new vulnerability. Now I have a whole lot more work for you to do. When you put automation in place to catch a lot of these security issues in advance, you can prevent that from becoming an issue. So maybe the security groundhog does show up in your project, but they're not going to see anything, or it's really apparent that you have full control over your security posture. And with that, I just want to say thank you to everyone. And the three tools that you can use to easily put security into your pipelines is dependency analysis, get that software bill of materials; static analysis, analyze your code on each pull request or build; and instrumented analysis to find those high accuracy and high impact issues. And if anybody wants to take a look at the InfoQ security eMag that just came out today, feel free to take a look.
Wow, amazing session, Erik.
Thank you.
I mean, I learned a lot, almost as much about groundhogs as I did about like security and everything too. I was going to ask you actually, so how can you be proactive in this situation to not like allow the security groundhog to come rather than reactive? I assume that that's probably the best situation to be in, right?
Right. So in a lot of organizations, there's a team that's going to show up, and you can't stop that team from showing up anyways, because they just have to appear. Like they feel like before they ship, they have to show up. But what you can do is shine a light around the groundhog's hole so that when he pops his head into your project, you've now detected where he's going to see the shadow. So you have your list of libraries. You know which of them contain CVEs. You've analyzed your code. You know where the vulnerabilities were because you fixed them.
Amazing. And do you have any recommendations on like tooling, open source or not, that'll help with like the remediation process of those vulnerabilities?
Yeah, so the easy thing is you can look at a tool like OWASP, the inventory that creates, or they're not a tool, obviously, they're an organization that contains a list of vulnerabilities like the OWASP Top 10. They'll give you remediation guidance. But ultimately what I would do is to use the tool that you use to find it, and each of these tools gives remediation advice. And the benefit of using the remediation advice from the tool is now you don't have to go through and learn every single vulnerability category and become a security expert in advance. You use the tool tells you what you need to learn, you go to act on its results, and it's a lot less work.
Couldn't agree more. Well, Erik, thank you so much. If anyone has any more questions for Erik or just wants to chat and hang out, remember you can catch him on the Hopin platform, as well as the Slack community after the event. But thank you so much, Erik.
Thank you very much.